Thank you all so much for joining us for the non-academic job offer and salary negotiation workshop. Joining us today are Tiffany Whitehead, Assistant Vice President of Talent Acquisition at Credit One Bank, Tracy Sperry, Recruitment Manager at Robert Half, and Teresa Solit, HR Business Partner at Akita Healthcare. So they are going to increase our understanding about job offers from a variety of employment sectors and provide us with strategies for how to negotiate our job offers. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to them to introduce themselves and provide us a bit of background, and then we are going to open it up to questions. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Tiffany first.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for welcoming me back again. I think this is my fourth time participating, and this is one of my favorite things to do. I have been with Credit One Bank for the last almost 4 years, and I've been in talent acquisition, labor and employment for well over 10. I'm really excited to chat with you guys today about all the exciting things that are going on and help you to better negotiate your salaries as you make your way through the world.
Tracy?
Thank you. I'm Tracy Sperry, and I'm with Robert Half, which is a recruiting agency. We specialize in finance and accounting placements. I've been there about 3.5 years, I want to say, and prior to that, I was in accounting myself. So I had a pretty long career in accounting. I'm a CPA. I also got my MBA from UNLV, so I love to come back and talk to everybody, and I'm really excited to be here. So thank you.
And Teresa? It looks like you're on mute. It's a little muffled. No. Are you calling in from somewhere as well, or are you just on? I'm sorry, I can't make out what it is. Maybe try leaving and coming back. All right, let's just give Teresa a few minutes. So what we'll do while she figures out her technology is we can just go ahead and jump into some questions as she is logging back in and out. So I'll go ahead and start with Tiffany and Tracy, and we'll jump right in and ask, do most job offers include the same key components? And if so, what are these?
Yeah, I think so. I think in my experience, you'll typically get your offer, a benefits package, 401k. I think that's fairly standard in any industry.
And I agree. Vacation time, medical, salary, everything like that is a pretty standard part of an offer.
So as we begin to get into the job market, and as we start to receive some offers, what type of information should we research so that we are adequately prepared to review and evaluate a job offer?
The cost of living, for sure, I think is one if you're looking at relocating. Something that I find often is that when we have folks who are coming to Las Vegas from a market like San Francisco or the East Coast like New York City, the compensation packages are entirely different. So I think one of the biggest things you have to look at when you're evaluating is the cost of living in the area that you're going to move to.
And I would also add just knowing the range of what the position pays, what the market range is, and then what the company is prepared to offer for that particular position. You should know that going into the interviews, and definitely if you've gotten in like past a first or second interview, you should know what the compensation range that's being offered is for the role, so that you can, take a step back, reach out, see what, colleagues have been offered for similar roles, reach out to a recruiter and just see what the market is paying. If you go online, I mean, there's just so many different you're going to get so many different answers, I think, as far as what like the range is. So I think it's probably you're going to get a better feel for it if you're just talking to people that are in the market, that are currently in the market, because the Vegas market has changed so much even over the last, year, 18 months. So
And
definitely do research on that. Go ahead.
that's a good point. I want to piggyback off what Tracy's saying. So another thing that you should look at is the laws in the different states that you're going to be applying in. So recently, the state of Nevada came out with Senate Bill 293. Senate Bill 293 says that employers cannot ask any questions about your salary history, right? So they can't ask you what you were making in your previous position. And then once you have completed an interview, you should be provided with the range for the role. If you're interviewing internally, like for a promotion at your company, once you've completed that interview and you ask for the range, you should be provided that too. So it's really, really important that you understand what the laws either in the place that you're going or where you're gonna be, because that can really impact how you're gonna go about your salary negotiation.
Thank you so much. Before we move on, I just wanted to see if Teresa was able to hop back on.
Hey, yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, this is much better. Sorry about that.
No worries, technology. If you wanted to introduce yourself, and then we'll go back into questions.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Teresa, and I've been with HR, mostly in healthcare for 15 plus years. And right now I'm a HR business partner with Acadia Healthcare. Used to be HR director before that. And so I'm really excited to join you again. Yeah, this is probably my third year doing this workshop with Tiffany, and really, especially in this market, I think you can never be in a better market than today for this. So looking forward to this discussion.
Great, thank you. So I think Tracy had just mentioned that it's really important to find the range of the position that you are interviewing for. Do you all have any tips on reliable sources where we can find this information or research it? I know there's so many sources out there, but which ones are the most reliable and accurate from your experience?
I think probably mine. One of the things that I do like about Glassdoor's ranges is that folks can go on there, people who are currently employed in those companies, and they can list what they're making. So I think that that is helpful. To your point, it is tough when you go on the internet, because I think that the internet it's a tough place when you're trying to find a compensation range and when you're trying to get accuracy. But I think, to Tracy's point, right, connect with some colleagues on LinkedIn, or more importantly, understand where it is you're going to be applying, because then that tells you what you can have access to, right? And there's no better access to something than like the company disclosing to you, hey, here's what our range is.
And I guess I would add to that, what we do, I should say, what we do is when we're working with clients, we find out what they want to pay for a specific role, and then they usually ask us like, what are accounting managers, for example, making, and we'll tell them, and it's just like from being a recruiter and working with the same type of roles all the time, we get a really, really good feel for the market here in Vegas. And so we can really help, even companies set the range that they're willing to offer if they're not sure, because they do it does change a lot. I mean, it's not set in stone. And so I guess, you know, asking a recruiter that's in your field what they're seeing in the market, to me, is a pretty good source, just because they're working with those positions across the board every single day. And I would think also maybe in the career office, do they provide that information at UNLV? Do they have like salary information?
I don't know if career services has that. I know they have career toolkits about, you know, resources for preparing for job searches, but I don't think we have a an actual list of ranges or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and sometimes you can start if you really have no idea, like about what the market. You can usually start with pay scale. Pay scale, you can log in the location and what's the salary and years of experience as if there is a job offer for you. So you can start with that. I rarely use salary.com because that's always mostly inflated number. And so I'll, even with pay scale, if you use that, make sure the company size is the same or the industry is the same. So at least it is very comparative. So as they said, be careful with what's out there in the internet. But if you want just to have like a base or a starting point, then you can do that.
Thank you. You mentioned that the market here has changed over the past 18 months. Can you speak a little bit on that? What are some major changes you've seen?
I can tell you, one of the biggest changes I've seen in the marketplace is that the candidates right now rule the market. They're we are facing a pretty significant talent shortage, and that has created all kinds of really interesting things that I have never seen in my career, and I'm sure these ladies likely would agree with that. I have never seen a market where the candidate shortage has created such havoc with internal organizations. And the other thing is that I think because the candidate shortage has kind of reared its head and really made itself known, one of the interesting things that it's done is it has driven up salaries to a degree, right? Because companies are so in need for this talent that they are willing to pay outside of their ranges, or they're willing to be far more negotiable than I would say they were 18 months ago when it was flipped. So I think that's the biggest thing I've seen.
Yeah, and I will add that, as Tiffany said, it's not really just the Nevada or the Las Vegas area. It's really across the country. We have this whole new Great Resignation of 2021, or they call it turnover tsunami, because there's a lot of workers who never came back after COVID for whatever reason. So there's really a shortage of talent across the nation, and some localities may be worse than others, but it's really across the nation that employer are really looking for talent. And so that's why this is really the best time to be in the market, and yes, depending on what's your industry, you can really be selective or have the luxury of being selective.
I have a question about that. Sorry if it's a little loud, but so for example, I've been working here on the Las Vegas Strip for the past 3 years, and I'm aware that my position is paying more elsewhere, especially now that they're like in dire need of candidates. How do I go about kind of negotiating my own salary now that I'm seeing other properties are paying more than mine is? And I've been kind of getting paid the same for 3 years, even though I've been here through the whole kind of pandemic.
I'm gonna let my colleagues pop in on this one, and I'll see if we're all kind of in alignment. That's a great question, by the way, Rachel.
I would say, and what a lot of people do, and this is not what I would recommend. If you want to stay at your current employer, a lot of people will just look for another job because they know it's paying more, and then see if then they'll be able to get a raise in their current job. And that's something that we just don't recommend doing. But if you feel like you've talked to your manager and you don't think that there's any room for them to give you an increase, then you do have other options. That being said, so anybody else?
And right, and I'll add to that too is, right now the employers, for one, is they're having a hard time getting candidates. So besides recruitment, the top thing on their agenda is retention, right? Because it is better to retain somebody than to get somebody new, less training. So if you feel that the company really values your talent, that is a conversation that you can start with your supervisor. They rather retain you than hire somebody else. But make sure that your data as far as the salary somewhere else is accurate. Because, and it also depends on how you will bring it up. Don't bring it up like a threat. Like, if you don't give this to me, I will leave, because they might take you for that. And so it's really, just be careful with that. It's really more of a conversation of, hey, I've been with the company for 3 years. I know the market is tight right now, and I see all these options. So is this something that we can negotiate about? So that you just have to start the conversation also with the intent that, as much as possible, you can say that I really want to stay here. This is a great place to work. I love the people who work there. So if there's something that we can do so I can stay and grow in this company, something like that, and not as a threat that if you don't give this to me, I will leave.
Yeah, I second what they said. I think the only thing that I would likely add is be very cautious of holding your employer hostage or thinking that you're holding them hostage, because there are ramifications far beyond just that, right? That will do reputational damage to you, and you don't want that. So I think it's not about what you're saying, Rachel, it's about how you're saying it, right? If you go to them and you say, well, everybody else in the market's making more money, so I should too. No, that's probably not going to get you anywhere. But if you go in there and you're able to really articulate the contributions that you're making to the organization and discuss it from that point of view, and timing is going to be critical for this here too, right? You don't want to just walk in and say, hey, I saw on the news that, there's the great resignation, and I know what candidates are getting, so I want more money, but really kind of talking about it at an appropriate time, like during performance evaluations or something of that nature. I think will really do you a good service when you're looking at trying to get some more money.
Thank you so much. So the questions we have in our chat are kind of go hand in hand. So the first one is, how do you go about negotiating a salary? And then the second one, which is very much related, is at what point in the job application, interviews, offer process should I negotiate the starting salary and benefits?
I'm going to pop in on this one because I have a strong position. If any of you have been with me through this workshop before, you will know that I have a really strong position on this. And my position is talk about it right away. Talk about it right away, because if you are going to interview for a job and you're looking for $50,000, but the job pays 30, you got a $20,000 problem. It's okay not to waste other people's time. It's okay to say, hey, can you talk to me a little bit about the range for the role? And then follow it up with something like, only because I want to be conscious of your time and make sure that we're in alignment there. I know that people tell you all the time, like, you want to be interested in the opportunity and you want to be excited about the company, and those things are really great. But people typically go to work. You're not a volunteer, is what I'm getting at. So make sure that you gently but confidently bring it up right in the beginning.
I agree. And I would say that, you know, when I work with candidates, I always give them the range on what my clients are willing to pay for a role so they have that information and they can decide if they want to pursue it. But if you're not using a recruiter, you know, it's important to get that range, like Tiffany said, right from whoever you're speaking with in HR or whoever your initial contact is. Just ask them what the range, you know, is, and then from there kind of know that the range is built, like the lower end of the range, it's usually dependent on experience, right? So if you don't have any experience doing that particular job, you know, that's where you know, you're going to want to come in maybe at the lower end. Otherwise, if you've got, and that's where I guess the negotiation comes in, right? Is if you feel like, hey, I'm worth the top end of the range, but even though I don't have that much experience doing this role, but maybe you have, you know, you did an internship or you have similar skills from another job that you had while you were in school, things that you can leverage that'll, you know, give you a good solid backbone for standing on why you feel like you should be at that top end of the range. Typically for candidates that are just coming out of school, it's hard to really push that top end of the range or even go beyond it. Once you have some experience, and if you're bringing something to the table that nobody else has, especially maybe new to the Vegas market, then you can, like skills that we don't maybe have a lot of in Vegas, you would be able to say, listen, I know you're only offering to 50, but I need to be at 60 because of this, this, and this. And you know, and it's based on skills. It's not based on the fact that you're moving from California, like Tiffany said, that they're not going to care that your cost of living was a lot higher there. But people do say that all the time. They're like, I can't afford to live on that. But it needs to be based on your background and skills.
Yeah, yes, I again, I second that. I think you'll start with interviewing the employer of what the job really is, so that at least the salary that you have in mind is comparative and it is really what the job is. The last thing you want is to have a job that you think as something and then the employer is actually giving something else. So then there's already a disconnect. So start with really knowing what the job is, and then you can ask for the range, for the salary range, and if that's within your salary range, then yeah, then you can go ahead and continue the interview process. And again, the interview right now, especially in this market, is not one way. The employer is interviewing you, but you are also interviewing the employer if the job is a good match for you. So keep that in mind. So you have other things, of course, if it's the right job, is it the right responsibilities, and of course, part of that is the compensation right for you. So come to that mindset that you are also interviewing the employer. So it is okay for you to ask for the range, not necessarily one amount, but for a range, because as they said, the range, depending on the employer, they have a starting point, a midpoint, and then the highest. And it all depends on what they're looking for, a specific skill set. And again, I want to reiterate what it said, that your salary has nothing to do with what your needs or your family needs. It has something to do with your skills and your competencies. They don't really care about your housing. If you bought a house, they don't really care about that. But it's the skill set that you're bringing to the job.
So what if our initial interview is pre-recorded rather than live or in person? When would we then negotiate salary?
You would wait until you have a conversation with a real person.
Mhm. Agree.
Yeah.
So going back a little bit to the current market and the talent shortage, how can we as students that may be entering the workforce or maybe we're even pivoting to a new career and might not have as much experience as is asked for take advantage of this? Are employers more willing to provide training now than before if we show we're willing and capable to learn?
You know what?
I would
I love that question. I really do. And I'll tell you why. I think it because we're in such a candidate shortage, I don't think it's so much that companies are more willing. I don't know that it's that they're more willing, but I don't know that they have the capacity, right? I think that that is a challenge that employers are facing. And so while they're willing to be negotiable on certain skill sets, some of them that are critical to doing business, right, and operating their businesses, they can't afford to reallocate some of that labor that they've got going right to train. So that is something that I think is kind of interesting, and I think it's a great question.
I agree. I have seen employers be more flexible on what they're willing to like resumes that they're willing to consider, candidates that they're willing to interview, where like a year and a half ago they wouldn't have been. And
Yeah.
maybe like not having every single box being checked off on the list of job requirements. I've seen a lot more flexibility there, and companies willing to look at to look at candidates as long as they have skills. I mean, they have to. And what I do in those situations is I really talk to my clients about that special thing, that the reason that they might want to interview this candidate where they might have passed over them previously. This is why, because they can do this and this. They're a quick learner. Their references have told me that they are able to jump in and like learn a new software or something, or they're contributing within the first week. Anything that sets that candidate apart, I think, then it they have you might have a better chance of getting an interview where in the past you might not have.
Yeah, correct. I agree again with that. And if you're a student, you don't have much experience, please add your volunteer work, because any volunteer work you can have transferable skill sets on your volunteer work. So if you don't have work experience that's right now, volunteer at some of these nonprofits, and that is something that could be a talking point during your interview. It's not exactly a job, but again, you're going to talk about your skill set, your competencies doing those volunteer work. Sometimes you can also include relevant hobbies, because who knows, you can have a supervisor who shares the same hobbies. As they said, right now, it's no longer all the required bullet points. You can, sometimes even if they say it's required, go ahead and put in your application, because they are, as you said, more flexible right now, especially if after they post the application and they're not getting enough candidates, they're going to go back and look at, okay, who are the next level of applicants who did not check all the boxes. And so your application's at least already there. Don't think that, oh, I cannot send this application, but because I don't have X and Y. So just go ahead and apply.
Thank you. So our next question here is, what are some significant red flags to look out for in job offers that are commonly looked over?
Vesting schedules, I think, is a big one, right? If you've got in your benefits package, typically you'll get some type of 401k or something of that nature. I think you should look very closely. Or if you've got like if part of your offer package involves like a long-term incentive like RSUs or something like that, you need to look at the vesting schedule. That's going to be a big one.
I would say where I've seen a lot of kind of offers fall apart or candidates not wanting to accept is around insurance and not maybe getting that info up front. Some companies have really expensive insurance, and if you're making a move, and let's say right now that you're like for example, the large gaming companies, they usually pay a huge part of the premiums for health insurance when candidates leave and go to maybe a smaller company or even a large company that isn't as huge as like MGM or Caesars. They might encounter really expensive insurance, and then it actually they'll be kind of taking a huge pay cut if they accepted the role, just with the given the difference in the insurance premium. So I would say find that out, and we try to do that up front, is finding out what the costs are and sharing that with candidates pretty upfront so that they know. And some companies have amazing insurance that you're actually paying almost nothing for it, but it's just good to know because that's really it can be a big expense.
Right. And start with what is really critical to you for a job offer. Is it the salary? Is it, as they said, is it the benefits? Is it the schedule? So start with that and ask about it up front, like when you're doing the salary negotiation. Again, the whole compensation, salary is just part of the whole compensation package. It's just one of the parts. So you have the benefits, you have the 401k, you have the recruitment. Some of them have stock options. So start with what is really the top for you. So you can have a high salary, but then, as you said, the benefits, the premium are so high too. So it's kind of like a wash. So start with that, and yeah, you can ask them like, what is how is your benefit, and then start with okay, I need to know also the schedule. Is it a night shift? Is it a day shift? Do I have to work weekends? Because if you are not available weekends, you want to know that upfront. Even doing at the interview, don't wait until the salary, the offer. You need to say that during the interview or know about it, about the schedule, so that there are no surprises when it's time for the job offer.
Another thing that I would add too is look at your taxes. I promoted somebody recently, and he said to me, "Wow, this is really great. Tiffany, there's so much more money." He said, "But the taxes." And that's something that I hadn't thought about. But if you are looking at taking a role where the compensation is going to be significantly higher, take a look at that too, because that'll get you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have another question here in the chat. Are there signs to when someone who is currently working should start looking at other job offers?
What do you mean signs? Like
What?
Do you want to, if you want to clarify, you can just privately chat me again if you want to clarify the question. I think what it means is if I'm in a current role right now, I guess when should I considering other job offers that I'm getting from other companies? It's kind of how I'm understanding it.
I think that's probably really individual, right? If and it depends on what your personal goals are. If you're looking to grow your career and you're unable to do it because the organization you're in is just too small and there's no room, I think it's going to be really, really individual. I would be careful of always jumping for money.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does that kind of destroy your resume, but I think it is demonstrative to people that for maybe a minimal amount more, your loyalty can be purchased and you're gone. So I think that's something I would be careful of. Now, if it's substantial and the opportunities that come with it are substantial, then I think you should always be open to what I call exploratory conversations. If somebody reaches out to you, have a conversation. There's no harm in that.
Mhm.
I would agree with that, and I would say that when I'm talking to candidates about an opportunity and they're interested, and then they want to move forward and submit their resume and see if they get an interview, what I tell them is, and I tell this to like everyone, when you're looking at this opportunity, is this something that you can see yourself doing in this role, staying in this role for like the next 2 years?
Yeah.
So you can't assume you're going to get promoted. You can't, please don't, you know, don't kind of go into it if you don't feel like you can be happy in this role for like the next 2 years or so, because first of all, you want to commit to your new employer. Hey, I'm going to be, you don't have to tell them, hey, I'm going to be happy in this role for the next 2 years, but you want to go into it with a long-term mindset of enjoying the role, learning and growing in that role without trying to hop into something else for like 2 years. And then I think it's definitely acceptable to see what else the company has, where the growth opportunities are, and if they're not there, and you're not happy or you want to keep growing, then definitely, explore those conversations on other opportunities, look around, but try to keep that 2-year minimum on your, and also your resume and your career progression. I literally, you know, the biggest pushback I get on any candidate, and we really don't even submit these candidates usually, are candidates that jump from job to job every year, every 18 months. There's very few candidates that can get away with that. And they can get away with it because like there's a really good reason for it, like they moved or there were family things or something. But they had amazing references and they were able to build still a really, really good career. But it's rare that those candidates, even in this market, they get passed on. So I think creating that longevity in your role is really important.
And I'm going to
Mhm.
piggyback off that. I don't think Tracy's talking about like, back in the day where somebody stayed somewhere 30 years,
Right.
right? But so, and I'll tell you guys a fun fact, right? Tracy and I work together all the time, and we have a wonderful working relationship. Like Tracy works on some of our roles, and she submits people, and that's a valid point, right? If I know that when I see a candidate that they're moving every 18 months, I don't look at that and go, oh, they're moving for money, they're moving to progress their career. I'm looking at that going, why don't you stay anywhere for any
Right.
length of time? Like it's demonstrative of something bigger going on behind the scenes, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. And if you have a job right now and you're thinking of moving or getting another job just because other people are doing it, you have to start with asking yourself, why do I want to move? Okay, start with that. Is it better salary, or is it career growth, or is it closer to my house? You need to be very clear as to what is your motivation for looking for another job, so that when something comes up, when an opportunity comes up, you can actually analyze that against your goal. And so it will not be just, oh, I got another offer, it pays a lot of money, but then money was not really your motivation. So if you take that job because it offers money and then but your motivation is really career growth, but you take the job because of the money, you think it's money, you'll end up in the same boat in 2 months or in 3 months, right? Because you're like, oh, now I have to start looking again. So then you'll go against the, not rule, but the preference of not having to job on your resume. So be clear with why you want to leave your present company. Be clear with why you are looking for a job so that you can analyze any job offers that come your way.
That's a great segue into counter offers. If you start looking for a job and your current company comes back to you with a counter offer, I strongly advise against it, you guys. I strongly advise against accepting counter offers for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're leaving because there are cultural issues at the organization or you and your boss have some pretty crucial conflict, the problems that led you to start looking in the first place did not disappear. They're still going to be there. Now they're just paying you more to tolerate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the other thing is, it says something to your employer if you just stay for money, right? And there is, I apologize, I don't have the reference with me right now, but there is some data that suggests that employees who accept a counter offer only end up staying another 18 months on average. So be sure that you're not, again, kind of trying to hold things hostage by saying, oh, well, I got this really great offer, so I'm going to go. Unless, of course, you guys offer me $10,000 more, because now you're burning bridges everywhere, right? You're with the company that thinks that you're going to accept the offer, but you take that offer and shop it to your current company to get more money. It's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So when we are at the stage where we are doing the negotiation, how can we help our potential employer understand why we deserve what we are requesting? How can we best articulate this? Maybe what are some do's and don'ts that you've seen? What not to say during the negotiation versus some good things to say?
I think it's more about, I think, what catches me is the deserve part, right? You have to remember that as a general rule, I would hope that most companies take the attitude that we pay jobs, not people. So if we have a job, right, that pays $50,000 and you're like, well, I really need 75 to make this move, and let me tell you why. It's, you're very aware at this point in time, because now that we've gotten down to the negotiation, you were well past kind of some of the preliminary things where you would need to demonstrate that. I think it's more about being realistic, right? Being realistic, and the company likely by this stage knows your skill set. They know what you have to offer. So you have to consider a couple of things. Not only is it about the money, but what about that opportunity, right? Money will take you so far,
Mhm.
but how are you going to be able to grow within that organization? And so make sure that when you're thinking through salary negotiation, that you're not just thinking about the dollars, because there's a lot more that goes into it.
Yeah.
And if you have to go through an exercise where it's really kind of an excruciating process to explain why you deserve that much, I want you to think about what that's going to be like in 2 years when you need to talk about a promotion.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. And at that point during the job offer, we hope that you have already sold yourself to the company. That's why they're offering you the job, and that's part of the interview process where you can gauge how much they're interested in you, right? So if they are really so gung ho about because you have specific skills that they are looking for, then yeah, you can negotiate better than in that position, rather than a position where if you say no, they can go to somebody else. So you have lesser negotiation on that. So see how the interview process is. See how the employer really wants you because you presented a specific skills. And then again, also as they said, it's a compromise, right? Because if you keep on pushing and pushing, and then the employer just bite on it, but they felt bad about it for giving you that salary, then you're not starting at it's not a good situation. So, you know the range, the salary range,
Right.
and hopefully you are within that salary range. And then just negotiate, okay, I have this additional skill set that was not part of the interview. Then let's see, and you can see how the employer will look at those additional skill sets. for them to say yes or no as their salary, as the salary that you are negotiating.
I would just add to that. I agree, and what we do is we find out from the candidate where within the range they would accept the offer before we submit candidates usually to our clients, and that way we kind of help with that process. So that is one benefit of having a recruiter. Is that we're able to kind of speak about the negotiations for you, because we don't like to negotiate after the fact. But going in, just knowing the range and just dealing with HR yourself, know in your mind, okay, their range is this to this, and this is where I need to be. And if they're offering you in the range and you know you're on the lower end of the experience, you're going to have a really good reason as to why you should be higher than, in the higher end of the range. And that's tough when you are entry level. If you've got experience that relates to the job, then I think you can make a better case for why you should be at the higher end of the range. But I would be careful if you want to get your first job and you love the company and you think it's an amazing opportunity. I don't know how much it's worth negotiating over a few $1,000s if you know what I mean?
And we've rescinded offers too, right? So like companies can, if a negotiation becomes too adversarial or just starts getting to be a little much, like we can rescind the offer and just say, hey, it seems like it's not going to work out.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I think it's really important to point out that like it's really rare that a company brings you in at the top of the range. They don't bring anybody in at the top of the range. The goal is the midpoint, because then you have nowhere to go. I mean, listen, everybody wants the top of the range. I want the top of the range. Of course we do. But is that realistic? And the other thing that folks coming into organizations typically don't understand is something known as internal equity, where you might want this top of the range. We have to keep you in alignment with similarly situated employees. So just because you're asking for it doesn't mean we can just bring you in. We might really want to, and we might think you're great. But if that's going to cause a really big salary gap between one of your colleagues who's doing the same job or a very similar job, who's making substantially less, a company isn't going to create that kind of liability for themselves on your behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to recall that there are oftentimes things that are happening in the background that you're unaware of.
Exactly. I can't agree more about internal equity. That's why they have a range. It's not like unlimited, because they have to make sure that they have a salary range for each position, because they have to make sure that it is equitable internally. The other thing is that we already mentioned before, salary is just one part of the compensation package. So don't get stuck with the salary, because you can probably, if the salary is not really to your liking, but hey, they allow you to come to work at 9 o'clock and you have to drop your kids early in the morning. That could be a good negotiating aspect too. So, okay, so the salary is this, but can I come later, like 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock? If you can make that work, because that's also something that's important to you, then bring it to the table. And that may even be better than a higher salary, but then you're stressed every morning, dropping your kid to work. So something like that. So again, make sure that the compensation is not, you don't think compensation as just salary itself.
I have another question kind of in the same vein, as salary not being the most, or like the end all be all. Especially now with a lot of people working remotely, how can we go about kind of negotiating, I would like to work remotely despite maybe other employees not?
Oh man, we run into this all the time, don't we, Tracy?
Oh my gosh,
Remote
yes.
for
Yes.
Great question, Rachel. This is welcome to the new world, right? Welcome to the new world. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If my boss asks me to wear a suit to work, I wear a suit to work, right? if the company allows you to work remote or has some kind of hybrid flexibility, fantastic. But if they don't and working remote is a big deal to you, just move on to somewhere that you can do that.
Yep.
I think one of the biggest challenges, certainly that we've run into in the era of COVID, is the work remote piece. And some people love it, some people hate it, some people really like the hybrid. But at the end of the day, it's at the company's discretion. So if they want you to come in, you got to come in, right? I get it though. I mean, that's a big challenge that we faced over the last 18 months for sure.
I just had a candidate I placed he was at a director level candidate, and he did actually ask if he could work remotely like every other Friday as part of, I think it was because they couldn't go beyond 3 weeks of vacation time, and so he asked for that and they allowed it. Because we're a little bit flexible to begin with. They don't really have they're pretty much in the office, but it's a smaller company. So I think that agreed, you need to find out what the policy is before you even bring it up. And if you don't sense any flexibility there, then I would just leave it. And yeah, because they're not going to be able to, they definitely can't make exceptions just for one person usually, unless it's like a smaller company where they're already doing that. So,
unless it's an accommodation, right? Sometimes we have folks
right.
to go out on an accommodation, but that is really a policy that is going to be left up to the company. So vet that out for sure.
Right. And for the remote work, before COVID, that's not so much unheard of, right? It's like, whoa, you will work from home. But now I think it's something that it's okay to bring it up because a lot of employees are still working from home, or some employers found that, and work from home actually can work. So you don't know, but that's something that it's okay to ask. But again, you start with, is that very important to you? Like, how important is that? And I've seen in posting where they actually are now posted. It's remote from home, so you can actually start with that. If they posted remote from home, then there you go. You can actually Google and search the job and then add the word remote and see what comes up, because they actually post that. Because some employer found it also beneficial. It's less expense for them if they can figure out how to make it really effective. So yeah, and then that's it. Maybe at the interview process, start with a conversation of something like, hey, what is the possibility for this job to have some days or to be remote? That's how you bring it up, and see how, if they say, oh no, definitely not, then there you go, you know already. You know the answer.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. So I think we have time just for one more question, and we have one here in the chat. Do gaps in employment hurt your chances of being hired?
Like, it depends why you have a gap. If you have a gap because you were taking time off to be a stay-at-home mom, I got no trouble with that at all. If you have a giant gap because you were doing time, well, that might be a different story.
Yeah, just be ready with your answer to why you have a gap in employment.
And I would also add to that, and something that I always say to my candidates is, employers are looking at what your experience, I guess, in your most recent like 5 years or so. So if you haven't worked in a certain field for that long, it's really hard to get a job in that field again, especially using a recruiter. You're definitely going to have a tough time trying to kind of present that experience as relevant to the role. So it's not even just gaps, but it's what you've been doing in your most recent positions that's really, really important. So, and that's where like it comes in at entry level. I have candidates all the time like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't have experience doing X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, you've got to start somewhere. So you've literally got to leverage off of everything you possibly can, every experience that you do have, and all your special like software skills are huge, especially in what I do in finance and accounting. Having like super strong software and tech abilities can help me place a candidate that has zero like work experience but has just really really good skills in that area. So I know that's kind of like a little bit diverting off the question, but I think it's so important that people realize that.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the big things is like, if you have a gap in employment, what did you do during that time to keep your skill set relevant? So like if you're in IT, for example, and you've got a 2 to 4 year employment gap in IT, that is enormous because it changes so quickly, right? So that's what I would look at. I would say, hey, what did you do to keep your skill set relevant during this time? Also, I would point out that that can impact you in the same way if you stay at a certain place for an extended period of time, like 10 years or more,
Yep.
right? What do you do to keep your skill set like relevant, to keep moving with the times? Because you're really in a situation where you're the last 10 years you've only been doing it there, so it's going to be really important on your resume to show that progression during the time that you were there. I don't think people think about that either, though, right? Because being somewhere way too long can be just as bad as staying somewhere way too short.
Especially if you stay in the same role.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to place someone unless you're like, in like an executive position for 10 years. But if you're like at a entry level type position for 10 years, it's really hard to usually it's really hard to place someone because they haven't been promoted, they haven't done anything different in 10 years. So their skills are just, stagnant.
Well, I think we are out of time for today, but before we do say our goodbyes, I just really want to thank Tiffany, Tracy, and Teresa for sharing your time, your experience, expertise with us. This was very informative. And then thank you to all of our participants for joining us today. Before you all log off, if you don't mind just filling out this really quick survey I'm going to drop in the chat that helps us as we plan for next semester. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thank you all so much for joining us.